let's say we had the omnipotent AI, so to speak, that was able to, where we turn over the control of the central bank to the AI, we turn over all these other things to the AI, then the question is, we say to the AI, now do the right thing. And then the problem with that is, and this is why I talk about, creating AI constitutions and so on, we have absolutely no idea what do the right thing is supposed to mean. And philosophers have been arguing about that, utilitarianism is an example of that, of one of the answers to that, although it's not a complete answer by any means. It's not really an answer, it's just a way of posing the question. And so I think that one of the features of, so I think it's a really hard problem to, you think to yourself, what should the AI constitution actually say? So first thing you might think is, there's going to be, something like Asimov's laws of robotics. There's going to be one, golden rule for AIs, and if we just follow that golden rule, all will be well. Okay? I think that is absolutely impossible. And in fact, I think you can even sort of mathematically prove that that's impossible. Because I think as soon as you have a system that, essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to put in constraints that, basically as soon as you have a system that shows computational irreducibility, I think it is inevitable that you have unintended consequences of things, which means that you never get to just say, put everything in this one very nice box. You always have to say, let's put in a patch here, let's put in a patch there, and so on. A version of this, much more abstract version of this, Gödel's theorem. So Gödel's theorem is, it starts off by taking the, Gödel's theorem is trying to talk about integers. It says, start off with Peano's axioms. Peano's axioms, you might say, in Peano thought, describe the integers and nothing but the integers. Okay? So anything that's provable from Peano's axioms will be true about integers and vice versa. Okay? What Gödel's theorem shows is that that will never work. That there are an infinite hierarchy of patches that you have to put on to Peano's axioms if you want to describe the integers and nothing but the integers. And I think the same is true if you want to have a legal system, effectively, that has no bizarre unintended consequences. So I don't think it's possible to just say, when you're describing something in the world that's complicated like that, I don't think it's possible to just have a small set of rules that will always do what we want, so to speak.
As a human being, I would say the search for meaning doesn't usually reveal it. But in my personal experience, that finding meaning in things is often a serendipitous effect, a byproduct of trying to understand what's going on. So that as a scientist, understanding what's going on and the mechanisms by which physical systems behave is different from searching for meaning. You're looking for something that's more prosaic, just a physical theory that's good enough to describe the thing you're looking at. Then it need not really mean anything except it worked, it was good enough. However, as part of this searching for mechanism, I find that bits of meaning creep in whether I want them to or not. So the universe is literally a quantum computer. That is, it stores bits of information on every elementary particle. Every time those particles interact or collide, those bits are transformed and processed, they flip. And the bit flipping that is going on in the universe is technically a computation. It's what's called a universal computation, capable of doing anything a digital computer can do. So this scientific and mathematical result that the universe is a giant quantum computer, I think does have, dare I say, profound implications for the meaning of what's going on. Some of them are kind of entertaining things and actually sort of liberating. So for instance, the fact that the universe is a giant computer means that there are features of the universe and things that are going to happen that we'll never be able to predict, even if we use the entire universe to predict it. Because it means that there are things that are going to happen where the only way to find out what's going to happen is just to wait and see. And that's kind of nice, really. It's a good excuse for why I didn't realize that this really bad thing was going to happen. It's not my fault. Like the way my old original MacBook Pro used to say when it couldn't execute a command in a vaguely feminine voice, "It's not my fault. I can't execute the command. It's not my fault." So the other question, which is related to the search for meaning that this computational nature of the universe reveals, is a rather deep one, I'd say, a question that people have been asking for thousands of years, which is why the universe has structure. Why is the universe so complex? Why do we see this diversity of living things, of non-living things, stars and planets, variation wherever we go when we look in the heavens, when we look closer to the Earth, when we look under a microscope, we see this incredible detail and complexity. Where the heck did that come from? So actually this computational theory of the universe gives us an answer which the ordinary laws of physics don't give us. So the ordinary laws of physics say, well, we have very simple laws. They can be written down on a t-shirt. At MIT, where I'm a professor, I see the laws of the Standard Model written on t-shirts quite frequently, with the laws of gravitation on the back, right? So we have simple laws, and then our observations of the cosmos indicate also that the universe began 13.8 billion years ago in the Big Bang in an exceptionally simple state. So we have a simple state and simple laws. So where did all this complexity come from? In some basic technical sense, the universe should be simple. It's like, we just take these simple laws, we take the simple state, we evolve it forward by a few billions of years. It should be simple. What the heck happened? It's out of control. Because the universe is computing, we now know what happened. Because a computer can be a very simple thing. We think of computers as having all these bells and whistles and parts that we pay a lot of money for, like this extra memory space and hard drive and stuff like that. But actually, to be a universal computer, you can be a very simple, homogeneous thing made out of bits that are just flipping by some law. You can make very simple models of computation that are universal computers. So to be a computer, you can be very simple. And indeed, our universe is a computer because the laws of physics, which are simple, support universal computation. And then you can also have a very simple state, but a state that contains in it the possibility to do pretty much anything that the computer can do. Like, ironically, this comes from a funny mathematical feature. So the mathematical feature is that I can have a set where every member of the set is complex, and it takes a lot of information to describe. But the whole set is really easy to describe. So I take, all the numbers from here to 1 billion. Or let's take all billion-bit numbers, like even bigger, all the numbers from here to 2 to the billion. Okay, 2 to the billion is a big number. There are only 2 to the 300 elementary particles of the universe. This is a large number of things. And almost every one of this set is like a billion-bit random number that takes 1 billion bits to describe. It's like, you don't want to have this number sitting around. But the whole set was really easy to describe. I just described it, the set of all billion-bit numbers. The set itself would be simple. So we can take a computer that it itself is a simple thing, and we can tell the computer, okay, just go out there and systematically compute everything that can be computed, okay? Now, that might sound like it's a complicated thing to do, but actually the program to do it is simple. You just say, okay, let's try the first computer program, let's see what it's doing. Then we'll try the second. While we're doing that, we'll try the second one, see what it's doing, evolve it forward a few million steps. Then we'll try the third, etc. And then you just keep on doing this, and you just systematically build up everything that can be computed. Now, the set of everything that can be computed is actually a simple set, and it's easy to describe. I just described it. And it's also easy to produce. You start out with a universal computer, like the universe. You give it a simple program which has in it the capacity for computing everything, and your computer just starts computing everything willy-nilly. But now let's look at the individual things that it is computing. So let's look at a member of the set of the things the universe is computing. Well, just in the same way that the set of all billion-bit numbers is a simple set, but it contains very, very random, complicated things that are hard to describe, so the set of all things that can be computed by our universe is a very complicated set. So we can have very complicated things that arise when this universe that's doing simple things to a simple initial condition.
In a universe, in the level 1 multiverse, in the level 2 multiverse, in the level 3 multiverse, in the level 4 multiverse. Now, in parallel with this trend of repeatedly underestimating the size of reality, we have also repeatedly underestimated our ability as humans to understand this. Underestimated the power of the human mind, and that to me is very meaningful and very empowering. And I think as we look to the future, this suggests that no, we're not doomed to stay forever confused, but there's real hope that by being creative and open-minded, we can ultimately understand this amazing reality that we're part of, and even shape it to be better.
Now, you postulate in your level 4 universe that mathematical structures generate multiple universes, and that's because mathematics is the underlying reality, not just something that describes reality, but the ultimate ground of reality. So,
I think there are two reasons to be more upbeat about this viewpoint than you suggested there, Robert. One is that since mathematical structures are eternal and timeless, never created and never destroyed, that means that what we do here is not something which is doomed to disappear into nothingness. In a sense, everything that we do in our lives is eternal, forever existing in this grand mathematical reality. I think that's a very empowering and
that sounds great. How would that happen if this...
Einstein's view is not that space-time is just some photograph of reality, but space-time, where you have these 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, is reality. And he even said himself when he was close to his death that death is just a persistent illusion, and he, I think, found some solace in that. So that's one reason to feel more upbeat about this. I think another reason to feel empowered by the mathematical way of looking at things is that some people find it kind of a downer to be reduced to a bunch of quirks. And one fascinating theme, which is coming out from many areas of physics and also neuroscience now, is that of emergence, where the higher level, the macro properties of things have sort of their own existence, even though you can in principle understand the motion of a wave by just studying the quirks bobbing up and down. A much more explanatory and useful way of thinking about it is by thinking about the wave itself, and that actually the quirks don't matter at all. You can have a wave in water, a wave in all sorts of other kind of substances. My mind would probably feel the same if I replaced certain kind of particles there by other kind of particles. The really meaningful reality is the higher level thing. It is exactly us and our consciousness and so on, and whether it's quirks or schmorks or something else is actually quite secondary. We have an existence then which is somewhat substrate independent, and I think that's also very empowering.
And that's the mathematics.
It works exactly because it's all mathematical, yes.
And whether the mathematics then expresses itself in quarks or some other feature in some other universe is somewhat irrelevant. So it's kind of what we call a functional approach, that it doesn't matter how the mathematics is expressing itself, but that's the deep reality. And so you go from the deep mathematics into us, and whatever in between doesn't matter all that much.
Exactly right.
Is that right?
Exactly right. And
I didn't know what I was saying.
And that's also why we've been so successful in understanding a lot of physics before we even knew what the building blocks were, because it didn't matter so much. That's why quarks were discovered much later than waves. We have to consider the possibility that we are actually the only life form advanced enough to build telescopes. And that means, in that case, that it's not that our universe is giving meaning to us, but we are giving meaning to our universe. Now, I find this rainforest here absolutely beautiful, and the Andromeda Galaxy stunningly pretty. Why is it beautiful? Because we are conscious of it. If we weren't here and nobody perceived the Andromeda Galaxy, it would just be a meaningless waste of space, as far as I'm concerned. So that does not make me feel small and meaningless. We are the meaning givers and the most meaningful things. And also, even though we're small, we not only give meaning to our universe, but we have learned to understand it enough that we can control it and make it better. And there's nothing in the laws of physics preventing the life that has started here on Earth from one day spreading into space and making much of our universe come alive. And if our universe fulfills its vital potential in this sense and becomes a cosmic self-aware organism, I don't know anything about how our ancestors are going to think of us, except that I'm sure they won't think to us as meaningless, because what we chose to do here on our green planet, maybe in our lifetime, made all the difference. So we should feel meaningful, important, and we should think, what can we do to really make a difference?
Of what's true in mathematics is not governed by rules.
Try to solve it yourself. Don't look at the answers. Don't cheat. Keep on thinking about a problem until you figure your way out by yourself. Then, so you have to on paying attention. Being patient and keeping attention on one subject is very important. And during this mindfulness, you'll find yourself encountering with your own mind.
But the point of universal computation is that you can have a single universal machine that can be programmed to do any kind of computation. And that's what makes software possible, and that's the foundation for essentially all computer technology today. But okay, the principle of computational equivalence has many implications. One of them relates to universal computation. It says that not only is it possible to construct a universal computer, but actually it's easy. In fact, pretty much any system whose behavior is obviously simple will manage to do universal computation. Well, it turns out that in the computational universe, one finds that lots of systems aren't computationally reducible. Instead, they're irreducible. There's no way to work out what they will do in any reduced way. There's no choice but just to trace each step and see what happens.
It says that simulating yourself is either slower, less detailed, chancier, or all of the above than actually being yourself. Which says that to predict with certainty what you will decide to do an hour from now takes more than an hour. It takes more computational resources, because this is true whether the universe is deterministic or probabilistic, irregular, chaotic, classical, quantum mechanical, these okay. Are you a decider? So are you making a decision? Can you model your behavior and maybe that of other things around you? And then the last one is, can I predict my own decisions? And that, of course, is a trick question because you won't be able to do this. If you answer the first two questions correctly, you cannot do the third. This is just a mathematical theorem about anything that is trying to predict itself.
Now, a general principle which may explain all of this stuff is the metric of entropy, or the measure of order or disorder. So the idea I want to submit is that on this kind of dimension of entropy, this sort of dimension of order essentially, there's a kind of sweet spot. So these are ideas that are talked about a lot at the moment in cognitive neuroscience and systems neuroscience. There's a kind of perfect place, there's a perfect balance between kind of formlessness or complete disorder and complete stability, so stability to the extent, or order to the extent, that the system then becomes inflexible. So for consciousness to be poised in this kind of optimal place, where we can scrutinize the world in the best way, learn the nature of the world in the most optimal way, and yet retain flexibility given that the world is changeable, then there's a kind of sweet spot where the system has to be, where it's perfectly balanced between disorder and order.
Famous mathematicians and physicists that when they wanted to solve some problem, the key is they think about, okay, I'm going to solve that problem, and then the next step, stop thinking about it. And let it percolate. Get the mind out of the way. Let the subconscious, metaphorical, perhaps it's limbic, let that system work on it, and then spontaneously it will start. Unless we talk about this entropic brain function, you get into these other stages of possibilities where like avalanches of networks start happening. Things start coming together in ways that your mind can't keep up with, but that we're actually designed to do those things.
Making in a very complicated forward system, there's nothing it is like to be that. You can show this because recursively nothing can act back on itself, and therefore there's nothing there. You can use it, but it doesn't feel like anything. And a key consequence of that is that you can build two systems, one on the left, which is recurrent, and one on the right, which is the equivalent, purely feed-forward version of that recurrent system, which have exactly the same input-output function here up to a t equal 4. So they do exactly the same job. You could treat them, they behave equivalently for any question and answers you want to get from them. And yet, if you do the analysis according to IIT, the one on the left feels like something, is something, exists. The one on the right, we can use it, but it doesn't exist at all in and of itself. So there is functional equivalence without conscious equivalence.
Recent research in cosmology has suggested that universes that produce more disorder, or entropy, over their lifetimes should tend to have more favorable conditions for the existence of intelligent beings such as ourselves. But what if that tentative cosmological connection between entropy and intelligence hints at a deeper relationship? What if intelligent behavior doesn't just correlate with the production of long-term entropy, but actually emerges directly from it?
Intelligence should be viewed as a physical process that tries
to maximize future freedom of action and avoid constraints in its own future.
Well, the key message today, the tuck-in message, if you will, is that these biological systems tolerate imperfection with respect to the mechanisms generating their appearance. And that fault tolerance is a remarkable quality that surely we must try to chase.
I could not believe I had pledged allegiance to research, where our job, the definition of research is to control and predict, to study phenomenon for the explicit reason to control and predict. And now my my mission to control and predict had turned up the answer that the way to live is with vulnerability and to stop controlling and predicting.
Love 2.0 describes that energizing micro moment that you feel when you truly connect with someone else. You meet eyes and you share a common source of positivity. Now, whether that emerges between you and your soulmate or you and a complete stranger, it provides powerful nourishment for your growth and your health. This book started as my data drew me to rethink love from the ground up. I've been studying positive emotions for decades, yet my latest data were telling me that the positivity that you feel when you're connecting with others nourishes you more than any other source of positivity. But when you're really connecting with somebody else, your heart rhythms come into sync, your biochemistries come into sync, even your neural firings come into sync. It's as if in that micro moment, a single positive emotion is rolling across two brains and bodies at once.
As science has learned more about the brain, we know that love is not just a feeling, or it's not just chocolates, as you're saying, that it's actually a connection between two living brains and a connection of some considerable power over the mind and the body. And we know that across this connection that people establish, they can send information back and forth, they can regulate each other's bodily rhythms across that link, and they can even change the structure of each other's brains across that link. And that totality is what love is.
Yeah.
One of the actions of attractors is not only to prepare people to act in a certain way, but they also alter incoming sensory information that people don't see reality. They see sensory data that's been filtered and compressed by their attractors as much simpler. And if your attractors are not accurate, you won't be seeing the real world very clearly.
So this encoding of the limbic system is malleable. It can change and adapt by constant interaction with a compatible limbic system of another.
There are many different ways of changing neurochemistry. Most of them have nothing to do with medication. That's why I believe in the long run, the most effective way of balancing neurochemistry is to balance our lives. Remember, experience changes the brain.
Whenever you have an experience, you devote more of your brain to processing that. And so when you get something, be it academic or sports or music or a thought, it's just that connection is now strong. Now an important point here is all experiences change the brain. Under stress, under fatigue, what happens is this front part of the brain here. This is the CEO of the brain. This is where David Lynch is in your brain. This is the director. All other parts of the brain send their information to the front, it gets integrated, it's sent back out. Under high stress, these connections are not used.
I wouldn't necessarily ask for more stressful experiences in my life, but this science has given me a whole new appreciation for stress. Stress gives us access to our hearts. The compassionate heart that finds joy and meaning in connecting with others. And yes, your pounding physical heart working so hard to give you strength and energy. And when you choose to view stress in this way, you're not just getting better at stress, you're actually making a pretty profound statement. You're saying that you can trust yourself to handle life's challenges. And you're remembering that you don't have to face them alone.
and your heart is pounding and you're sweating, if you're able to remember that, okay, well, this anxiety is distracting or distressing, but I also know that that anxiety, that heart pounding, is my body trying to give me energy, that in some way my body and brain are trying to rise to the challenge. Literally just remembering that 5 seconds when you're experiencing anxiety can transform that anxiety into a physiological state that actually gives you more energy, that actually gives you more confidence.
In many circumstances, the data are that optimistic people get depressed at only half the rate when setbacks occur, that optimistic people do better than expected on the sports field, in grades, and in many kinds of work, that optimistic people have yeastier immune systems, they're less likely to die of cardiovascular disease, and that descriptively optimistic people are generally liked better. It turns out if you take pessimistic people, depressive people, of which I'm an example, and you teach them principles of recognizing the catastrophic thoughts they're saying to themselves, this interview is going terribly, I've really lost my touch, and then arguing against it. No, Joe's been laughing and smiling at my jokes throughout. Then it turns out you can make people permanently, lastingly more optimistic.
All of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with, so teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put forth.
What we call psychosocial support was really love and intimacy. Or if you reduce it down even further, it's eat well, move more, stress less, love more. That's it, boom. And the more diseases we study and the more mechanisms we look at, the more we find that these same lifestyle changes have impacts to the degree that people make them. We find to reverse heart disease, diabetes, prostate cancer, change your gene expression, lengthen your telomeres, easier. And there's studies that show that just when the family sits down together to have a meal together, just the sitting down together, there's better academic performance, lower truancy, lower illness, all the kind of things that we want. Again, it goes back to the social factors and the power of community and family.
Great. Other questions, please. Your name?
Hi, my name is Megha. My question is about what are the things we can adopt and encourage that can help build a stronger immunity against diseases?
Yeah. Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is to actually have more love in your life, believe it or not. There was a study that was done by Sheldon Cohen that was in the German American Medical Association. And I don't know how he got this through the Institutional Review Board, but he got volunteers and he dipped rhinovirus, a dripped rhinovirus, that causes colds, in their noses. 100% of them got infected, but not everybody that got infected actually got sick. And they found that the more social contacts they had, the more friends visiting them, the more phone calls, the more love that they had 4 times fewer signs and symptoms of a cold, even though they were all infected. So through Koch's postulates, we have this idea that the bacteria or the germ causes the disease, but it's a necessary but not always sufficient factor. Even with people who are, Margaret Chesney did a study at UCSF where she found that men and women who are HIV positive, who are lonely and depressed, were more than twice as likely to develop AIDS and die from it than those who weren't. So, diet's important, exercise is important. These all affect our immunity. But probably more than anything, these social factors. And, we tend to think that the time we spend with our friends and family is a luxury that we do after we've done the important stuff. And to me, the value of the science is that it increases awareness. So we understand just how powerful those things are, and that the time we spend with our friends and family is not the stuff we do after we've done the important stuff, that it is the important stuff. And that's also part of why when I'm in the middle of the night and wanting to get up and do work, I have to remind myself these things.
Exactly, great. We have one more question back here.
not really so much. I mean, we fine-tune a little bit. You know, some people can metabolize refined carbohydrates or gluten or things like that better than others. But for the vast majority of it, it's really the same. And when I started doing this work, I predicted, incorrectly as it turned out, that the younger people who had less severe disease would do better. And what we found, it wasn't a function of age or disease severity. It was simply a function of the more you change your diet and lifestyle in these areas, the more you improve in every metric we looked at and every disease we studied. Now, there may be ways of fine-tuning this as we learn more, but what I'm still so struck by is that these same lifestyle changes, the more diseases we study and the more biological mechanisms we research, the more reasons we have to explain why they're so powerful. And it's so hard for a lot of people to believe. They're like, I mean, talking about my feelings can help me live longer? Are you kidding me? You know, is that the best you can do? It's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. I mean, David Spiegel did a landmark study at Stanford years ago where he took women with metastatic breast cancer, randomized them into two groups. Both groups were getting the same chemo and radiation and surgery. The one group had a support group once a week for an hour and a half for a year in the same way we were talking about, and then they stopped. 5 years later, he told me he almost fell off his chair when he looked at the data. Those women lived twice as long. You know, so these simple things can really make a powerful difference.
Great. With that, thank you very much for coming.
As some of you may know, self-organization is a mathematical term. It comes from the mathematical study of systems, specifically complex systems. And you know that complex systems, which are open to influences from outside themselves, capable of being chaotic, and non-linear, meaning small inputs lead to large, difficult to predict results, lead to an emergent set of properties. It just arises. You don't need to program it. And one of those properties is called self-organization. And amazingly, you can look at the mind as an embodied and relational emergent self-organizing process and understand why, if we as a human family don't shift what we're doing with our information processing, we could easily destroy life on Earth. It relates to self-organization. So let's keep our minds on that, because soon we're going to see how modern culture gets us to construct a sense of self that may actually be wrong. And not only wrong, it may be so embedded in who we think we are that we don't even know it is taking us over individually and collectively and actually killing us. That may actually be a construction, and the fantastic thing about it being a construction is we can deconstruct it and liberate a constructed view of the self that may be actually more accurate and more helpful to human life and life on this planet. So let's see how that would work. When you look at this conduition and construction, and you study all sorts of things, and this is in all the different books I write about this subject, so this is just a simple summary slide. It turns out that you can say what optimal self-organization is. So if one facet of the mind is a self-organizing process, you can then ask, how do you get optimal self-organization, which has 5 features. It's flexible, spells the word faces, by the way, flexible, adaptive, it has the mathematical quality of coherence, which is resilience over time, it's energized, and it's stable. This faces flow is like the flow of harmony. There's a huge amount of science behind that, but we're just going to get to the take-home message, which is if you are not doing what's necessary to promote optimal self-organization, which I'll have you consider is happening now on this planet, then what happens to the individual, to the relationship you have one-on-one, or to the family, or to the community, or to the nation, or to the entire ecosphere, is you get chaos and you get rigidity. This is straight out of math. Complex systems which don't allow optimal self-organization move towards chaos or rigidity. Then you can say the natural question is, well, then how do I promote optimal self-organization? How do I develop that flexible, adaptive, resilient, coherent way of being that's energized and stable? And it turns out there's an answer, and the answer is you differentiate and you link. And in common English terms, we'll use the term integration for how you optimize self-organization. So integration is defined in the way we're going to use it as the linkage of differentiated parts. So whether we look inside your brain and your head and study every psychiatric disorder that's ever been studied, the one finding that's been found across every disorder is impaired integration. If we look in my field, attachment research, at relationships that don't promote well-being, like with developmental trauma, it's impaired relational integration. And what does that do to the brain? It impairs the growth of integration of the brain. Why does that matter? Because integration in the brain and the whole body, in fact, is the basis for every form of regulation we have, regulating emotion, mood, affect, the expression of emotion, thought, behavior. So this graph, as simple as it is, actually explains your individual life with your mind as a self-organizing process and the life of the planet. Because when we don't honor the differentiated needs of different species of living organisms on this planet, and we assert a differentiated right to treat Earth like a trash can, what results is a chaotic world that we're experiencing right now. It's called a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's a term that's used in the military, it's used in the media. The VUCA world we're in right now, what I want to suggest to you, is coming because the human brain has a vulnerability to think that it's separate from the rest of living organisms. It's like I once attended a quantum physics think tank, and we'll get into that in a moment, and the first presenter put up a slide. Quantum physics has demonstrated that the world is profoundly interconnected. The real question is, what's wrong with the human mind that thinks it's not? And that's pretty funny and incredibly sad. And it's the issue of the quiz we're going to get into in a moment. What's the self? Because you may say, well, of course, the self that's me is sitting in this chair. Or the self that's Dan is up here on stage. And that view is so common and so misguided. Energy and information flow, if that's where the self is coming from, I'll suggest to you, is not limited by skull or skin. And yet we use the skin as a defining feature of who we are. And that is a toxic lie that is creating misery in humanity and misery for other living beings. And it's something we can do something about. Why is love and awareness so overlapping? That's a grammatical error. Let's do it again. Why? Why is love and awareness, why are they so overlapping? Why is there so much overlap? So let's take a look at the next slide. Here is a quick quantum course and what I think is going on. So I was asked to speak at a conference as just a co-faculty member with 150 quantum physicists and mathematicians and other types of physicists. And I kept on asking them in this week we spent together, what is energy? Because if the mind is an emergent property of energy, then we ought to go to the scientists who study energy, right? Makes sense. And they said, well, energy isn't really something, it's a lot of different things. I said, but why do you use the word energy? And here's what they said. Energy is the movement from possibility to actuality. If we don't question that word self, we are in for deep, deep trouble. Human potential can be tapped when you get to this plane of possibility. When you drop out of those plateaus of a separate self, it's a win-win-win situation all around. Love and kindness are the strongest way of being as a human being we can have on this planet.
So what is it that makes some groups obviously more successful and more productive than others? Well, that's the question a team at MIT took to research. They brought in hundreds of volunteers, they put them into groups, and they gave them very hard problems to solve. And what happened was exactly what you'd expect, that some groups were very much more successful than others. But what was really interesting was that the high-achieving groups were not those where they had one or two people with spectacularly high IQ, nor were the most successful groups the ones that had the highest aggregate IQ. Instead, they had three characteristics, the really successful teams. First of all, they showed high degrees of social sensitivity to each other. This is measured by something called the reading the mind in the eye test. It's broadly considered a test for empathy, and the groups that scored highly on this did better. Secondly, the successful groups gave roughly equal time to each other, so that no one voice dominated, but neither were there any passengers. And thirdly, the more successful groups had more women in them. Now, was this because women typically score more highly on the reading the mind in the eye test, so you're getting a doubling down on the empathy quotient? Or was it because they brought a more diverse perspective? We don't really know. But the striking thing about this experiment is that it showed what we know, which is some groups do better than others. But what's key to that is their social connectedness to each other.
Now with the wolves, you can really see the lives of individuals in the stories of simply the wolves of Yellowstone Park, because in Yellowstone is the only place in the world where wolves have, in fact, been watched through the course of their lives. And there are fantastic stories about individual wolves. There was a wolf number 21. He was called the super wolf. He distinguished himself from other wolves because his behavior and his personality were extraordinary. He lived at a time of very high density in the population. The wolves had lots of encounters with other packs. There was a lot of fighting that went on. And this one particular wolf, 21, never lost a fight, but never killed a vanquished rival. Both of those things are unique. No other wolf ever did that. He died on his own terms of old age by walking up to a rendezvous site where they used to wait for their pups, and he laid down right there and he died while the rest of the pack walked away across the valley. No other wolf ever did anything like that.
So the thing that I'm proposing we do here is that we reach behind us and we grab the dust, that we reach into our bodies and we grab the genotype, and we reach into the medical system and we grab our records, and we use it to build something together, which is a commons. And there's been a lot of talk about commonses, right? Here, there, everywhere, right? A commons is nothing more than a public good that we build out of private goods. We do it voluntarily. We do it through standardized legal tools. We do it through standardized technologies. Right? That's all a commons is. It's something that we build together because we think it's important. And a commons of data is something that's really unique because we make it from our own data. And although a lot of people like privacy as the methodology of control around data and obsess around privacy, at least some of us really like to share as a form of control. And what's remarkable about digital commons is you don't need a big percentage if your sample size is big enough to generate something massive and beautiful. So not that many programmers write free software, but we have the Apache web server. Not that many people who read Wikipedia edit, but it works. So as long as some people like to share as their form of control, we can build a commons, as long as we can get the information out. And in biology, the numbers are even better. So Vanderbilt ran a study asking people, we'd like to take your biosamples, your blood, and share them in a biobank, and only 5% of the people opted out. I'm from Tennessee. It's not the most science-positive state in the United States of America. But only 5% of people wanted out. So people like to share if you give them the opportunity and the choice. And the reason that I got obsessed with this, besides the obvious family aspects, is that I spend a lot of time around mathematicians. And mathematicians are drawn to places where there's a lot of data because they can use it to tease signals out of noise. And those correlations they can tease out, they're not necessarily causal agents. But math, in this day and age, is like a giant set of power tools that we're leaving on the floor, not plugged in health, while we use hand saws. If we have a lot of shared genotypes, and a lot of shared outcomes, and a lot of shared lifestyle choices, and a lot of shared environmental information, we can start to tease out the correlations between subtle variations resource infrastructure to do all of this.
So to take a step back and look at one of the most exciting recent trends as applies to infrastructure within the financial sector, there's a latency bias that's going on in financial networking. So we have global exchanges scattered around the world, and they all want to talk to each other for arbitrage, for market-making purposes. And so I'll show you two examples here. These are the fastest current network routes from Chicago to New York and New York to London. Chicago to New York is entirely on land. New York to London is almost entirely through the Atlantic Ocean. And if you take a look at the latencies via spread networks and Hibernia Atlantic on the right, these latencies, the round trip delays presenting a packet round trip, are actually starting to approach the physical limits allowed for photons traveling through optical fibers around geodesics on the Earth's surface. So for the first time, and this is really only happening in the financial sector, the financial sector is pushing the physical limits of information transmission capabilities around the Earth's surface. And I think that opens up some really intriguing opportunities for exploiting position on the Earth's surface. Finally, here we see Entropica spontaneously discovering and executing a buy low, sell high strategy on a simulated range-traded stock, successfully growing assets under management exponentially. This risk management ability will have broad applications in finance and insurance. So what you've just seen is that a variety of signature human intelligent cognitive behaviors, such as tool use and walking upright and social cooperation, all follow from a single equation, which drives a system to maximize its future freedom of action. Now, there's a profound irony here. Going back to the beginning of the usage of the term robot, the play R-U-R, there was always a concept that if we developed machine intelligence, there would be a cybernetic revolt. The machines would rise up against us. One major consequence of this work is that maybe all of these decades, we've had the whole concept of cybernetic revolt in reverse. It's not that machines first become intelligent and then megalomaniacal and try to take over the world. It's quite the opposite. That the urge to take control of all possible futures is a more fundamental principle than that of intelligence. That general intelligence may in fact emerge directly from this sort of control grabbing rather than vice versa. At the same time that latencies are collapsing around the Earth's surface, information generation that's relevant to these market trading and market making activities remains distributed. So these are a couple of my favorite examples. The first one, not terribly widely known. So UBS, as one example of a firm, has recently started mining live satellite photos of retail parking lots to figure out and to try to reverse engineer store traffic. Second example, social media mining for live trading on the markets, mining sentiment, things like this. These are two of many different examples of why the information generation that's critical to making a profit in the markets is probably going to remain geographically distributed for the foreseeable future. At the same time, we want to reduce latencies and reduce spreads.
It's even getting so discrete as what you eat for breakfast. So a new technology they're developing now primarily for airports is picosecond lasers. Love this. So this is a laser which can hit everyone in a 50-meter radius and simultaneously, more or less, and figure out what temperature any part of their body is. It can do heart rate, breath rate, and it also detects off-gassing from the body. It can recognize individual kinds of chemicals or components, so it can see if you've got drug residue on your shoe or explosive residue on your hair. It can also see if you have had a lot of coffee for breakfast based on how much caffeine is coming out on your breath. Like incredibly intrusive stuff, but all data that's being gathered en masse, right? Well, what's interesting about the real world data from this proliferation of sensors, right? The traffic lights are all monitoring you and able to do facial recognition, stuff like this. What's interesting thing about this kind of our future 1984 scenario is that all those real-world sensors are having all your data aggregated and sold and traded without you ever knowing it's being obtained.
So, taking another step back and realizing that we're stuck on the Earth's surface, at least for the moment, in this geographically distributed trading environment, this is what a typical arbitrage transaction looks like if we think of it as an extended space-time event. So you have two locations that are geographically separated, and trading, even if it's pre-coordinated, needs to be to some extent coordinated after the fact, just if for no other reason than to maintain capital requirements and to maintain net neutral positions wherever possible in the case of arbitrage transactions. So this is the way things, for the most part, are done right now. And this is the way they can be done. And so various firms in the financial sector are already doing some approximation of this, but until recently there was no universal optimal solution that was known for how best to coordinate trading in multiple locations by positioning yourself in between markets. So to be more concrete, let's say you want to perform trading on both New York exchanges and London exchanges. How do you most efficiently do that in today's latency arms race environment? And the answer turns out to be to position yourself somewhere in between, at least in network terms, New York and London, so that while you're not the first person in the world to hear the latest prices coming off the New York exchange or the London exchange, you are the first to hear the correlations between them. And you can think about this as a sort of financial or econophysical analog of reflex arcs in vertebrate biology. So if you touch something, your finger pulls away before your brain feels the pain from the heat. This is because the pain signal doesn't have to travel all the way to your brain. It just travels to your spine, and your spine sends a signal back to pull your hand back. Same thing here. If there are arbitrage opportunities, rather than requiring a round-trip transaction, it's possible to position a coordination server at a geographically intermediate location that enables trades to be performed more quickly and coordinated more quickly. So this is the subject of a paper I wrote in Physical Review about a year and a half ago called Relativistic Statistical Arbitrage that solved the universal problem of where to position such coordinating servers. And the answer turns out to be pretty interesting. I'll skip the derivation since we're running short on time, and I'll just skip to the results. This is the answer. Now, this is a few provisos. This is one representative solution set with lots of assumptions. The solution that I skipped through is actually far more general, but this gives you a flavor of sort of treasure map that comes from the universal solution.
So just like Audrey 2 from the Little Shop of Horrors, who needs blood to grow, these free services need your data to grow. They are not necessarily evil, or there is no conspiracy theory, but they spy on you because it is their business model to spy on you, right? The business model of free is the business model of corporate surveillance. So you might have heard the saying, if you're not paying for it, you're not the customer, you're the product being sold. Well, in this case, I prefer you are the quarry being mined. You are the livestock being farmed. And really, it's not even about your data. Your data is just raw materials. That's what's being mined. It's raw materials for something that's way more valuable, for your profile, for the virtual you, the digital self, the simulation of you, your sim that these companies create to understand more about you. Why? Because I can't take you and I can't put you in a lab and prod you. There are laws against that, to see how you react to things, to see what your fears are, your ambitions are, right? I can't do that right now because your corporeal self has rights. But if I can simulate you, if I can have enough information about you that I can build a simulation of you, I can put that simulation in a lab. And I can prod it, and I can psychoanalyze it, and I can study it all I want using whatever techniques I want. Because your simulation has no rights under the law today. So that's one of the things that we need to change. This is not just a technical issue. This is also a matter of legislation.
So once we have this consensus mechanism, I think this offers a great new opportunity to a new kind of a symbiosis between blockchain and AI. So I talked about AI being a major conference of three major trends. I alluded to the computational power, Moore's law, and then possibly quantum computers. I also talk about some new inventions in the algorithm. But what AI needs the most is to have data so that AI can learn. But right now, all data are concentrated as centralized platforms. So there's very little incentive for individuals to contribute data because they basically get nothing in return, and maybe their privacy could even be violated. So I envision the future of the world where the ownership of the data should be completely returned to the individuals. So all my personal data, all my behavior data, all my online data, all my genomics data, all my medical records, everything should be owned by the individual, and the privacy should be completely protected. But then you say, wow, then how can machine possibly learn anything if everybody keeps their secret private? And there is a beautiful thing called privacy-preserving computation. And that will make it possible to have a data marketplace. So I first of all protected all my privacy data, but I can leak information out one bit at a time, totally at my control. And such a world will be a data marketplace. Individually, so it's a peer-to-peer marketplace where individually own their private data, and then there can be a bidding and selling process and very selectively controlled by performing privacy-preserving data marketplace. So there's really a world where mathematics will enter economics in a very central way in making a data marketplace possible, so that all of us will own our individual data, and then Google Cloud and all these entities then can compute in a centralized, they can compute useful statistical information without intending us to reveal these privacy data. So I really think about this world where both AI and blockchain combined can do great social good in this new era of crypto-economic science based on in math we trust. Because when you really think about what's the problem with our society today, it's because there's discrimination against minority, and that is a fundamental of our society. But when you really think about AI learning, let's say if my AI algorithm is already working accurately 90% of the time, but I want some extra data so that I can go from 90% to 99%. The data I need is not yet another kind of data which looks very similar to all the previous data I have seen. I want data which is called to have high mutual entropy, namely the data that's most distinct. And that by definition is owned by the minority. But then in such a data marketplace, I will bid the highest for those data which are most in the minority. So then the economic incentive structure will be aligned. Our society will be value the minority the most. And that's exactly what we need to do social good. So finally, there's a vision that the ugly duckling can somehow become a beautiful swan. Because the ugly duckling is not ugly, it's different. But now, difference will be valued the most. Minorities in this fair data marketplace will not be discriminated against. So I really see this wonderful new world in a conference of three major trends: quantum computing, AI, and blockchain. But I also see myself coming from academia and often in interactions with colleagues in industry, we really can enter a new world where the latest scientific idea, it's really, really fascinating and totally amazing that these mathematical concepts was purely invented by mathematicians in abstract could turn out to be so useful. So something like number theory. Every day when we conduct a transaction using HTTPS uses number theory in the most essential way. So this is a wonderful new world where collaboration with academia and the industry can really lead to great progress. As I said, the greatest opportunity of making progress is oftentimes see a conference of some major trends before anyone who in their specialized area couldn't see the overall picture. And I really think that the symbiosis among these three major trends will be the defining characteristic of the future of